6.5%, was it? Is that what the current odds are of the Stanley Cup?
Well, and if you look at the round-by-round progression, the Stanley Cup favorite is the Vancouver Canucks.
Like, what a time to be alive!
Talking you through every goalie controversy, scoring slump, and draft lottery bust, this is the C4 Podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com. Here they are, the best starting lineup we could afford under the salary cap. Chris, Matt, Anna, and Adam.
Welcome to another episode of the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast. I am Chris at Lightforce, joined virtually as always by Anna Forsyth at 84603. It's just the two of us this week. No special guests lined up, but that has everything to do with the fact that the Vancouver Canucks actually haven't played a whole lot of hockey in the past week, which apparently is the one break they get this season, unlike the 20 breaks that like the Montreal Canadiens get that everyone's upset about.
Yeah, or if you get COVID, then you get an extra break as well.
You know, we'll probably get into this in sort of the show as we progress, but it's just an interesting sort of world that we live in, especially as it relates to some of the hot takes from us here at C4, but also abroad around what it means to get a COVID break in the league and how some feel that, they have different takes on how that should be approached.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't want to be flippant about it. Like, COVID, even with young, fit people like NHL athletes, it's still a big deal. But yeah, it's hard to know without getting a look at the inner workings what abundance of caution means, you know, whether they're making smart decisions or overly cautious, or they're not taking enough caution. Yeah, it's hard to know. And obviously we got in the AHL, Utica haven't played in 3 weeks now.
Something like that. So
it's rough because obviously they don't have the same resources that the NHL does.
No, it is definitely an interesting time at the very least. But no, we're not here to talk about the pandemic per se. We're here to talk about the Vancouver Canucks and what's been going on in the world of the team in blue and green. We were recording an episode last week while the game was going on, and it appears that game did not turn out so well, which, it's somewhat par for the course. And then the follow-up game, maybe not so well either. From here, what does that mean for the week ahead? Obviously, probably not a whole lot, but Anna and I will pick the meat off those bones as best as we can. And then the F word is probably going to be the biggest F word we've had in a while, because there's a whole lot of F words being dropped by people on the scene, on the ice, players on the ice, coaches on the bench, people in C4 Discord. I'm surprised Baby Forrest hasn't been dropping the F word. Man, would she get in trouble if she did?
No, I feel like your home is very wholesome place, but I guess the game is on, and JT Miller is saying what he's saying, so she could pick it up.
It's possible. It is very, very possible. So we got all of that coming up, and hey, let's just talk a little bit about Tim Peel too, because everyone else is. You're listening to the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast on the Full Press Coverage Network and CanucksHockeyBlog.com. The Vancouver Canucks decided to play the Vancouver Jets. Sorry, the Winnipeg Jets here in Vancouver. Got my thoughts all twisted.
If they're playing themselves, they might win a game.
Yeah, this was again while we were. Actually, no, it would probably end up in a tie, and the shootout would go on forever. When we were recording with Mike Paris, we knew the Vancouver Canucks were losing. What we ultimately did not realize was that they were going to lose badly in a game that lacked inspiration, where obviously Horvat, wasn't playing, and injuries, big deal. You could probably argue they weren't moving their feet, nor were they moving the puck, which is also a problem, as we've learned over the course of the season. And I don't know, looking at that game, what we take out of it as a positive, because the Canucks looked uninspired. And part of me actually wondered, I truly wondered, is there more to the story? Because the Vancouver Canucks had played the Montreal Canadiens last, and the Canadiens had entered COVID protocol. And I sort of started thinking, is it possible that that's in the back of the players' minds? Is there maybe that sort of worry that's taken them off their game? Well, since then, no news is good news because all the Vancouver Canucks players were tested, no problems. And they followed that up with an even better game on the Wednesday against the Jets, where they almost allowed someone in the Manitoba region, and I don't know if that stretches into Saskatchewan or into like Western Ontario, but they almost allowed someone in that region to win $1 million. Why? Because when a player scores 5 or more goals in one game, someone will win $1 million.
Yeah, I mean, because when they bring that up on the Canucks broadcast, it's always just so theoretical. Just the idea that one player could score 5 or more goals.
Well, we ask this every so often on the show. When was the last time a Vancouver Canucks scored 5 goals in one game?
Is that a pub quiz question? Do you know the answer?
I know the answer.
I don't. What era?
So the difficult part of that question is I would be lying to you if I actually provided one.
Okay.
It has never happened. No Canuck player has ever scored more than 4 goals in one game.
Now that checks out.
So it is possible that someone might take home $100K. Like there is greater odds that that might occur because it has happened before, but no Vancouver Canuck player has scored 5. So
yeah. Yeah, that's a shame. I mean, it does seem to be a specialty of the Canucks of just like showcasing players or reigniting players' seasons if they run into sort of a dry patch. Like Connor Hellebuck, outstanding goaltender, not had the best of starts compared to his abilities this season. And then they like give him a shutout and then a 5-1 win. Like, just like, I've said this before, but you know, if you're struggling, they're just the best team to play, it seems.
And it's so unfortunate that couldn't be the case. Like I'm a long-suffering Vancouver Canucks fan. And, you know, growing up during the Oilers dynasty where anytime they came to town, if they were in a rut, and they often weren't, but if they were, Vancouver was the tonic to solve all problems and allow Gretzky to score 10 goals. Like, I mean, not that that's actually what occurred, but there is a reason why Wayne Gretzky has set many of his personal records and personal bests against a team that plays out of Vancouver. Whether he played for the Oilers, the Kings, the Rangers. In fact, I'll bet you there's something to do with the Blues and his time in St. Louis that he acquired by playing the Vancouver Canucks. I totally makes sense why Vancouver tried a couple times to get him here, because at least that way he can't hurt us. It's kind of like the, you know, what we now know as Tyler Toffoli. He can't hurt you when he plays for you. Mm-hmm. And they had that for like what? A
hot minute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's just hard to. I was just taking a look at the post-game quotes, and I shouldn't have done that because it just made me mad. Just, you know, Travis Green is quite a fair coach, and he will tell it like it is. I hate that expression usually, but he's quite good with being upfront about his losses. But when him and Jordy Ban are saying like they didn't get the bounces, like they didn't deserve to lose that game. And you just think, okay, Canucks are hitting a lot of posts. I get that. It seems to be a disease that Pedersen had, and he's passed it on. Now he's out of the lineup. But they're losing games 4-0 and 5-1. If you're losing by 4-goal margin, it's not about the bounces.
What are you talking about? Because one bounce could have changed the entire dynamic of the game.
I mean, also not getting the calls, but I don't think that's a Canucks thing. I just think the officiating.
I am told by many on Twitter, which is a very solid authority on the matter, that the Vancouver Canucks get screwed by the league because the league hates Vancouver.
Well, I do think that's true. It's usually about broadcasting and scheduling. And I don't think they hate Vancouver. I just think Leafs and Habs have a bigger market. And also Jim Benning is bad at negotiating.
The thing about sort of the quotes, and actually we'll talk probably about this as we get into half full FMT. But there was one from Rooster, which I want to say was either today or maybe from this weekend. Actually, it might have been today after practice, where he had sort of ragged on the schedule and how the Vancouver Canucks have played the most games. They've played a lot of hockey. They haven't had really much of an extended break until recently, and how other teams have, and obviously for a variety of reasons as to why they've gotten it, one of which is the Montreal Canadiens and the fact that they haven't played for a spell now. The thing about all of that is that if that's the reason that doesn't allow your team to succeed, that actually speaks much more harshly of your team. That level of adversity is all it takes to cause that deck of cards to just completely scatter.
Right, because I do buy into the fact that the scheduling of the Canucks this season, it's gone from bad to worse.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
not trying to discount that at all. It's just that
right.
That's it.
And I just feel like, maybe we'll see down the stretch, but if it was affecting them that much, you'd think it would show up more in injuries and stuff like that, which Canucks do have injuries, but usually not for that reason. I do get this hard. You don't want a week break. You want more time between games, fewer back-to-backs. That would be more ideal than having a week off and then right back to the nose to the grindstone. And I get it's tough, and tougher still in COVID times, such a strange way to behave, but compared to the everyday person, NHL players have the freedom to travel and do their jobs. I know it's not the same thing as a normal life. Believe me, I do get that, but I just don't think that, everyone's in the same boat in terms of that. I don't think that can be an excuse for just how badly the Canucks are doing.
Well, no, and earlier I said I'm not discounting the schedule. The Vancouver Canucks have had a harsh schedule, all things considered. Right now, even after their 1 week break, which is coming to a close in a couple of days, they still have played the most games of any team in the league. That's how surreal things are. Is the Vancouver Canucks, as of right now, when we're recording this episode, are the only team that has played 37 games.
Yeah.
So, there is some credence to the fact that the schedule's been tough, but this is not a unique event. Every season has tough schedules. Obviously, this season is a tough schedule for everyone. Oops, hit the mic. Some more than others. It's just, I feel like when you start hearing players and coaches and GMs and that's just not just a Canucks thing. When you start hearing saying, oh my goodness, if it wasn't for the schedule, it's the woe is me. And it's okay, cool. That's an excuse. You're telling me why performance is down. So did you not know this? Because I'm thinking beyond that, okay, what was not done? And I don't fault a player. This is not, hey, Rooster, you needed to have done something differently. Now I'm starting to sort of go up the chain. And as we've already heard many times before, maybe they didn't expect the schedule to be this way because they're only taking things day by day.
Yeah, that's the thing. I totally agree with you. As the schedule sucks, but they knew the schedule when they started the season, and their coach needs to clearly manage them better. Are their psychologists not working out? Is the training not as effective as it could be? And then, as you go higher, Jim Benning could be putting better people on the roster in order to share the load a bit more and maybe make the schedule a bit better. So it's not like we're blaming Antoine Roussel for the failure of this season.
It's now we're hearing, we actually heard it out of the presser from Jim, and maybe that's what set the tone, is that the GM says it, so now it's sort of the party line and others have to sort of socialize it as well. I truly don't know. You were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that not they want to revisit Jim Benning's disastrous speaking to the media from a couple weeks ago, but I think it was abundantly clear how badly prepared they were for the season to work out as it did. When Nate Schmidt came to Vancouver and the Vegas GM said, well, everyone asked him whether he was worried about trading in division. He said, well, he'll play in the Canadian division. It's fine. Like, he was prepared for the season to work out how it was. Jim seemed to be completely caught on the hop by that. I just wonder
that's shocking.
why. Yeah.
Well, because life comes at you really fast.
Yeah, apparently it does.
Yeah. A couple other sort of tidbits that have happened over the course of the week. Bailey is now out for the season. He had shoulder surgery. There was a picture of him flying commercial that he had posted online. I think it was a comment that he was on his way to, was he New York or Boston? So that obviously made the presumption, okay, he's not coming back, because the moment that international travel takes place, to a quarantine, like you're not returning to play for a period of time.
Although it's a week now.
Well, okay, so I will talk about that. The fact, though, it means he did have surgery. It sounds like it's successful. Sounds like he'll be back, sort of quote unquote on the ice this summer, which leads to his return next season for training camp. But that is official.
It's a real shame.
What's still unclear. It is. He actually played quite well. I mean, I enjoyed the contribution that he was providing. He was the type of sort of role player the Vancouver Canucks need, where you're paid as a role player and contribute accordingly. But that's not a player issue per se. That's the person signing the piece of paper issue. The other uncertain aspect of injuries, though, is the fact that Pettersson is still out, and by all accounts won't be returning this month. Now, you might say, Chris, come on. It's March 29th when you're recording this episode. It's March 30th or later when I'm listening, and that's true. But for a player who is out day to day, he has been out many days to days.
Yeah, and now we come back to the lack of transparency in communications, because I don't see how this is helpful for the Canucks to have a bunch of angry fans and media who are like not looking at you positively because you've mismanaged their expectations. And obviously they may not have known early on just how bad, sure, but like they've just completely botched the communication here. But yeah, it does worry you that they knew a week ago that there's no way he would be back after the week break. That is worrying, but at the same time, the Canucks are probably not going to make the playoffs this season.
Whoa, blasphemy.
I know, super negative take from me, but I think we've talked about this before. There's no point rushing him back. And actually, our good friends at Canucks Conversation had good points to make on this, and just how long it took Brock Besser to be comfortable again. Not necessarily healed. He was healed at the start of the season, but was he comfortable?
Yeah. No.
Right.
The rushing back part's interesting, because we actually got into a discussion of some sort in C4 Discord. I wouldn't say an argument. It's more of a discussion that
we don't
may have had
argument.
Some stronger opinions. Bo Horvat returning to play one game before the week off. And my point is to suggest why. Like, if the Canucks were in the thick of things, if they were truly like in the playoff hunt, and I understand that mathematically they still are, but they're not. Their actual odds, like the math, the science behind this, for the Vancouver Canucks to actually make the playoffs is now in the single-digit percentile. Like, they're 9 times out of 10, the Canucks will miss the playoffs. So there's a lot that needs to go their way for that to work. So my thought is like, well, why would you bring him back for that one game to then have an extended break? Why not take that opportunity to ensure that he's rehabbed, well to go? I get that there's sort of this period that you then need to sort of get comfortable on the ice again. But does one game before a week-long break serve the purpose of getting you comfortable? It would almost occur to me that you're kind of like getting out there, skating around, and then in the week off, you're rusty again. And if you look at how Bo played that game, I'm not going to suggest this is related to him hurting or having an injury or anything of the sort, because I don't know that, but he didn't look good. So could that have been a contributing factor? So I think for me, the focus should be on looking for ways to go and manage your player personnel more effectively. And in the conversation that took place, I think it was Andy that might have said it, but the point being is that you look at like the NBA. How many times do star players or big name players get maintenance days, even with teams that are in the playoff hunt? Like you manage your personnel in such a way to ensure that they're there for the long haul. You have the depth to accomplish that. Different game, different sport, different bench. So again, it's not a direct parallel.
But
it's just
you could argue with less physical impact, right? And it's true in football as well. The big stars of the game definitely get days off training all the time. And Bo doesn't strike me as that person that would ever ask.
Well, no, and that's the thing. It's like that was one of the points.
Protect players from themselves.
Yeah, ask a player how they're doing. You got to trust them. And I don't argue with trusting a player. You kind of have to trust them. But you also have to understand that a player's desire is to compete. Like even me, I never played professional sports. But when I was growing up playing amateur sports, there was one actually year, but I was going to say one day, I was sick. I had like strep throat, and it went directly from that into something else. Like I was in a bad way. And here I was trying to reason with my parents how I should still be able to go to soccer practice. This isn't me playing a game. This is me trying to reason with them that I should be able to go to practice and take part, because the competitive spirit was telling me I was fine. I was not. So take it to a professional level with a player who has to balance, their desire to compete with their, understanding of how their career is somewhat tied to their health. I still feel that desire to compete potentially wins out. And you think about sort of the code in hockey and how there's this just belief that you'll play through anything. As a coach and as sort of, general manager, I might take opportunities to think longer term than that game coming up against the Jets.
I completely agree, because I mean, if you think about it in a logical way, players, if they were thinking about their long-term career and, being able to provide for their families or being able to do the thing they love for a long time, they wouldn't do a ton of things that they do in their everyday life as a hockey player. They throw themselves into very dangerous situations.
Mm-hmm.
And you do have to have some of that blind competitive nature where you kind of ignore the logic. And that's what's good about sport. But you need to have people protecting you from that as well.
Yeah. And in my case, it was my parents, and not to suggest that, Bo's mom and dad need to give them a holler here. But the point is that you would have those sort of people that, think sort of the bigger picture beyond that sort of desire to compete. And again, for me, I wanted to practice. But speaking of practicing, you know that the greatest players never quit practicing their skills to improve their game. And really, Anna, you shouldn't be any different. The ICBA trains thousands of workers every year on everything from Excel spreadsheets to excavating trenches, from personal leadership skills to construction estimating, from fall protection to effective management skills, and 500 other courses. Online, on demand, there's webinars, and even COVID-safe in-person classes. ICBA has an option for you and your busy lifestyle. Start climbing the corporate depth chart by sharpening your skills today. Check out icba.ca/courses.
Take hitting out of the game. You can't hit anymore, so don't do it.
The unsportsmanlike conduct, I want to get an explanation on it.
No kidding.
Because how do you get suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct?
Plus interference. There's no interference there. He had the puck.
Now, Madison never ever did that before. Now, why did he do it? Because he was mad.
Well, your early favorite for the Calder Trophy, that's for sure. Elias Pettersson, you might even say your early favorite for the Hart Trophy.
Just to get back to your question, Elias is going to play plenty. He's going to get a lot of power play time. And yeah, I'm concerned about our offense. We lost 200-point players, and we've got to find a way to score.
Okay, let's look at the week ahead for the Vancouver Canucks. It's kind of a hodgepodge because as they restart themselves, They get one game at home against Calgary. They then head off to Edmonton to play the Oilers, and then on the way over to Winnipeg to play the Jets. And if we look sort of beyond that Winnipeg Jets game, there's also a game the following night. But it's kind of weird where the Vancouver Canucks, over the course of 3 games, are playing 3 different opponents. Because as we've seen with the scheduling, for the most part, you generally play 2 or 3 games against the same opponent. So it's kind of a quirk.
Yeah, it's almost like a normal season.
Funny that. But when we think about the Vancouver Canucks, so let's, we referred to it earlier. The Vancouver Canucks, after 37 games, have 35 points. So below 500 hockey. We see them, above the Sens in the north, but they're behind Montreal, who's holding on to the 4th and final playoff spot. They have essentially Calgary has a game in hand, but Calgary with the game in hand is a slightly above Vancouver when it comes to the percentage. But the problem is that they're losing this distance that they have to a team like Montreal, who's had its own sort of challenges, obviously, as of late. And arguably, when Montreal were to resume play, they can lose 6 straight games. They could start pulling a Buffalo, and yet they still hold on to this 4th spot. That's how crazy this situation is. You've got Toronto, who's essentially going to go and either have 1st or 2nd place. The Oilers are up there pushing. So are the Winnipeg Jets. Those are sort of the 3 teams in the north that are probably going to be, fighting over number 1. Montreal's holding on to 4th. I don't imagine they'll find a way to get themselves up above Winnipeg, though I guess it's possible. Mm-hmm. Calgary, Vancouver are looking to get that 4th spot. And then you have Ottawa, who are just doing Senator things.
They're just happy to be there, happy to be included.
Yeah. I feel that the Vancouver Canucks are sort of in this position where if they make a run and, have a playoff push, that's great. I actually, you know what? I'm okay with that. But what I don't want for this to do is change the team and how they approach sort of the possibility of trades and acquisitions over the course of the season. Like, I think Vancouver needs to be weaponizing whatever it is they have available to them to set up for next year. That's what this trade deadline's about. And if they string wins together, cool, that's great. But this is a team that hasn't looked at all that comfortable. They lost 2 games to the Jets where it was, mail it in Monday and whatever Wednesday. And now facing a Calgary team who is in a weird spot of its own, and we'll talk more about Calgary a little bit later on, seems to be turning things around a kind of bit. Then they got to go to Edmonton, who's been hot. Winnipeg, who seems to now have their number. It's just not looking good.
Not at all. And, we talked about the deadline. Jim Benning is definitely trying to save his job, as he was last year, but hopefully he kind of takes the temperature of the room and thinks that the way he is trying to save his job should be by, sell, make some good moves, clear out some space and get some cap space ready for when PD and Quinn come off their ELCs, to re-sign Demko, all those good things. Hopefully he looks at it that way. I think I'm still probably with our friend Mike Paris that, the Aquilinis are trying to save money, so maybe we might be stuck with Jim either way. But
even if the Vancouver Canucks are stuck with Jim has already told us, team's 2 years away because, reasons, pandemic, stuff like that.
Right.
Nothing to do with the fact that
2 years away, they're not buying. Like, they shouldn't be buying.
Well, no, correct. Yet we've seen them kind of do that previously. Like last year is actually the greatest example where the Vancouver Canucks kind of went out and bought in a position that was not guaranteed to have them in the playoffs. Pandemic hits, they find themselves into the bubble, and then they make a run of it. I'm not taking anything away from the team, but if that instance allowed for Jim to say, yeah, you know what, I think we should buy. It worries me that where the Vancouver Canucks sit right now, even though like the science says they're done, that they're like, but you're saying we have a chance. That scares me.
You're completely right, but if you think that, like, Jim Benning, day-to-day Jim Benning, he said 2 years, like, he pulled that out of his A. Like, he wasn't thinking last year that they were 3 years away. He was thinking, if I don't make the playoffs, I'm going to lose my job. Which was possibly true. Probably true.
One might argue the pandemic might have saved. Like, if that doesn't happen, there's people in the stands, there's money that's, like, the situation's a whole lot different if the Vancouver Canucks were to miss the playoffs. I think you're right. So you're on that note, he's looking at his job security a whole lot differently. But how does it change now outside of, they're not going to fire me because they can't afford it?
Well, I would say that he thinks, one, I might lose my job anyway, whatever I do. That's, like, one possibility. Two, like, and then he's like, if I am trying to save my job, I think that Aquilini's, well, they won't fire him before the end of the season. It's possible that if Jim Benning, goes out and misspends again at the deadline, that there'll be such a, like, a critical mass of ill feeling towards him, especially with fans coming back into arenas next year, as we presume they will. If Jim Benning does deal very badly at the deadline, that Queens might be left with no choice because of Canucks fans turning completely against him.
Yeah, by most accounts, the Canucks are looking to sell. They're positioning themselves well to trade assets away with a longer term vision in sort of the works. Now, one might argue that the longer term vision isn't all that long term. Not here to do that because we've done it more than enough on this show. But the fact that we could have a conversation where I think I can be reasonably confident to say I'm jaded and sort of, battle worn because of what I've seen Jim and this administration do is not that far-fetched. And the other worry is maybe that he doesn't go in and buy, is that he goes and sells the wrong things at the wrong price, right? Like, I'm almost in this position where, if the Vancouver Canucks don't actually do anything, are they really that bad off, like worse off? Like, sure, money, players need deals, big names. Yeah, I totally get that. But if the Vancouver Canucks don't hurt themselves, really, that's not a bad thing. It kind of goes back to when we had that conversation in the offseason that by not making a deal, Jim did good. Well, now I'm almost in this position. By not doing dumb, Jim done well.
Yeah, it's kind of sad that that's where we're setting expectations. And the other thing is that we've seen, them pick up a couple of Maple Leafs cast-offs, and we think, yeah, that's more like it. That's how you build your roster. But of course, they're on expiring contracts. And what if, rather than re-signing these cheap guys or picking up some more cheap guys, they just go, fill their spot with more expensive old guys.
Well, that's the off season's problem. Like that. There's so many issues. Like, what should the Vancouver Canucks have? They should have some, cheap role players. What do the Canucks actually have? They have some cheap role players. They have a lot of expensive role players. And with the arguments, well, that's what they're worth on the market. Doesn't mean the Canucks need to pay. Like, the whole conversation that I got into with Caleb where you going to suggest they just dress Utica? First of all, what an asinine comment. Like, no, there are a ton of players that would be willing to play in the NHL on great deals. There was one who used to be a Vancouver Canuck on the blue named Troy Stetcher, who's playing on a phenomenal deal in Detroit. So to suggest that it has to be a Utica player, that's kind of asinine. But my point is that when you start tying up the money in those role spots, as Jim has been apt to do, because they're good in the room and they got a ring and they have heart and I don't know what else they have, that prevents you from then reallocating those dollars to the top end talent, the top tier talent. Like, there's a reason why the Vancouver Canucks, you often hear that they're kicking tires about player X, but then nothing happens because, one, it hurts the Canucks from a financial perspective, ties up the cap in a way that just, adds to the strain. 2, you have obviously the issue of the player not necessarily wanting to come to Vancouver for a variety of reasons, possibly. And then 3, I just don't trust Jim to be able to get the job done.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I will say that, that whole market value thing, when you buy like players, it's your roster building isn't just, buying players at the deadline. It's the whole, it's years and years of development. And if you're creating this environment where people want to stay, that's where you get good deals. That's where you get team-friendly deals and people re-signing for cheap or cheaper than they would on the free market. And if you're good at that negotiations, you get people like Tyler Toffoli, who did want to stay, actually. So it was a good environment. But yeah, Jim just wasn't up to the aspect of re-signing it. So it's not just bringing in new players for the right price. It's like balancing contracts and creating that best environment for development of a good roster.
Now, on that note, the word is Tanner Pearson might be available. Injury isn't too severe. Adam Cadet's name's been bandied about. The one, though, that seems to have gotten people worked up is Hamanek's name, and the fact that there are teams inquiring about his availability, but that Travis is not interested in waiving his NMC. Now, this is the thing that I don't quite understand, why fans get upset when players who negotiate clauses in their contract choose to either exercise or not. Like, did Travis have the negotiating strength to demand an NMC or an NTC? Maybe, maybe not. But the Vancouver Canucks needed a player on the blue line. Like, again, they had an option they chose to go in a different direction on, and they needed something, for a decent price. Hamonic was available. He wanted to play out west. And yeah, he got one. So the fact that he doesn't want to waive it, good on him. I remember Edler has time and time again elected not to, waive his movement clauses, and that's all for him. Yeah, are there times when I kind of wish he would? Sure, but I don't fault a player who chooses not to. Yeah,
don't get mad at a player for enforcing clauses in their contract that someone else put there and someone else agreed to, especially not a guy that purposely sought out a team in the West to look after his sick kid. And
that's the thing that's completely missed, is that he's made decisions that have been quite clearly family focused, including when the NHL returned to play in the bubble. Yeah. And he was quite clear on his approach.
Yeah, he's made decisions that have maybe not been completely putting his career first. So really, you cannot fault a guy for then enforcing something that he's clearly worked hard to get.
Yeah. The other thing, and this might seem odd coming from me, I don't actually have an issue with Jim Benning handing out clauses such as this. Even though I might think he's not the guy for the future, when it comes to negotiating a contract and a deal, what could a player get on the market and what might they ask for? Gillis handed them out like candy because they allowed for him to go and put together a roster and a team that was a win-now team. And often the argument's like, oh, he raided the cupboard and he hammered this team so they couldn't rebuild. That wasn't what he was asked to do at the time. He never even got an opportunity to give it a fair kick at the can because he got exited, once it was clear it needed to occur. So Jim Benning, I actually, Jim, no problem. It's just that when it comes down to the situation where you do wish you had the flexibility, you don't. And that is what it is. And that's just more indicative, though, in a general sense as to how the Vancouver Canucks have been in this Jim Benning sort of administration. It was 3 or 4 years ago when they had a ton of cap space and for one reason or another could not work deals like the Toronto Maple Leafs did, where they're like, give us all your bad contracts and with picks and we'll be happy to take them off your hands because look at our cap. Let's do this stuff. Heck, a budget operation like the Coyotes has done this too. Now, granted, their reasoning is we got to get up to the floor, But the point is that when you have opportunities that you take that can take advantage, you take advantage of them. And Jim has not shown that he's been up to snuff to do it when the opportunities arise.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's two reasons you give out like NMCs and NTCs is for the short term to build a winning roster quickly or finish off your winning roster for a push. You can completely understand why Gillis did that. Other reason is to like sign friendlier contracts with better terms elsewhere. So keeping money down or keeping years down. And can you say that like Jim Benning's contracts have good value elsewhere? Like not really. And has there been at any point like Canucks being a good winning team with just a couple pieces missing before a playoff run? No, they got quite lucky with their playoff run last year.
The one final thing I'll also point out is that Jim has signed some questionable deals as a general manager, but it's hard to argue that the deals that he signed weren't actually market value at the time. He's just been swinging on the free agent market and missing quite a few pitches. And that's unfortunate. And that ties into when you're negotiating these deals with players and then adding in clauses that might be included to compete, whether it's from a price perspective or how the contract might be structured. Like Louis Eriksson is the greatest example. Everyone knew that Louis was going to be targeted by the Vancouver Canucks, and I bet you that he could have gotten that money probably not anywhere, but many other locations. He came to Vancouver. Worked out kind of in the first year, kind of second year maybe, and that's it. And it's been an albatross ever since. Mm-hmm. To Jim's point, every team's got bad contracts. Not a lie. Problem is, you seem to have quite a few more than others.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that horse has been beaten how many times?
Yeah, I love how this section we just had the week ahead, and we just ended up ranting about Jim Benning. But
yeah, well, that's probably going to be next week too, because until the trade deadline comes and goes, anything is possible. We're going to take ourselves a short break. You listen to the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com and the Full Press Coverage Network.
He liked to say the F word.
Oh, then get the here then. Okay, see ya.
Is going to have the F word on it.
I wish I could give you an explanation about it. I can't. You, out of here.
You said the F word, Dad.
You called me the F word.
Darryl Sutter, prior to Gaudreau's 500th game, was asked, reflecting on this young player's career, what are your thoughts? And he decided it was the most appropriate time for him, and I quote, to say, if you're just basing it on his 500th game tonight, hopefully he has more energy than in his 499th game. What the actual F? Now, there are going to be some of you that listen to this podcast like, damn straight, coaches need to do this. They need to light a fire on a player like Gaudreau and really motivate him. I'm not entirely sure that's how you motivate people. That's akin to a conversation we had on IOTA about corporal punishment, which was something a teacher I had used to talk about, but had been around for. Now, Darryl didn't go in and smack Gaudreau around to motivate him, but he publicly
know that.
Him. Well, actually,
can I
don't.
Just say it? Yeah, and I was going to say there's been several coaches who have smacked their players around who still have jobs.
Yeah, this is just so surreal. So, people were like, oh my goodness. I would say a very large, maybe loosely large collective group was like, what the heck, Darryl? But what I felt really spoke volumes was former player Daniel Carcillo. Because one of the complaints that, we get, you're just podcasters, keyboard warriors, basement bloggers, whatever it might be. You don't know what it's like to play the game. True, we don't. But Daniel Carcillo does. And his thoughts on the Sutter brothers were something else. Now, he went on, and as I sort of pull up the tweet to read it, he went on to say, just to make it very clear, that he's actually had some tough coaches, but they approached it a whole lot differently. So Daniel Carcillo's tweet was, as head coach of the Kings, Darryl Sutter refused to let us eat on the plane after a bad loss and told a female stewardess to F off when she didn't roll the food away fast enough. Hockey can do better than the Sutter brothers. So here's a former player of his, not painting Darryl in too good of a light. And Carcillo, as I said, went on to say he's had coaches like Quenneville, Vigneault, who are tough coaches, but treat the players respectfully. They're straight with you. Like, hey, here's what I need you to do. You're not doing it. This is between us. And while we saw Vigneault here in Vancouver sometimes say, this player, they need to do a little bit better. They know that because they knew that. The conversation had been taken place probably many times before AV was saying they need to do this. And I'm sorry, from a philosophical perspective, that's how I would approach it. And I get that that's not always been the case and that's not always been the way, but this is like one of these legacy things that just needs to disappear. It does serve no purpose. And I'm sorry, it's no different to like Don Cherry Rock'em Sock'em. It's a legacy of an old place and time that no longer has a purpose.
Completely agree. And I will say that what Darryl Sutter said about Johnny Gaudreau, that's bad coaching. The stories Daniel Carcillo said, that's abuse. He abused from his position of power. Who knows what motivates Johnny Gaudreau? There are arm around the shoulder people, there are kick up the A people, and maybe getting tough with Johnny Gaudreau works. Don't do it in public. It's such a classless look. I doubt saying that before his 500th game would have motivated him. He knows he probably had a bad game the game before. But yeah, deal with it in private. And I know I said earlier in this episode, I like honest coaches, but singling out a player like that at that time, yeah, it's completely classless.
Well, think about it. He's being asked, hey, tell us about his career. He's going to play 500 tonight. And to say, I hope it's better than one game. So really, what have you just done? You've just said his career was defined by game 499. Now, if there's truth to that, I'd be surprised if, Johnny's still in the league. If his entire career is defined by game 499. It's not. Now, could he have actually phrased it differently? He totally could have. He could have said, yeah, this kid's played a lot of hockey. Reaching 500 games is definitely an accomplishment. I hope he comes out, knowing that with a, chip on his shoulder, plays with an edge, plays tough. He'd probably tell you that maybe, his last couple of games, I'm there again, how are you positioning it? You're going out and saying, hey, I believe in this kid. Darryl was like, no, I'm going to tear him down because maybe Darryl thought that was what needed to happen. And this is the scary part, is that coaches like Darryl still exist and they continue to get jobs. Everyone. It's like the coach that's told to tear down is somehow, serving a purpose. If you're going to tear someone down, how often do you hear people say, oh, tear me down to my face? Do it person to person. You know what? Fine. If that's happening, I still don't necessarily like it, but that's between sort of you and me. But then to come out and have to do it publicly like that, it's almost akin to saying, oh, I've been here so long, he hasn't been listening to me, I'm going to tear him down because it's the only way I'm going to get through to him. Again, that's indicative of much larger problems, which I don't think are at play here. And even then, it's still not the right thing to go and do.
Yeah, it speaks to hockey culture that people like Darryl Sutter still get jobs. But I think we all have a part to play in changing that. I think the league needs to be forced. Clearly they aren't doing it by themselves, progressing. So, the media have a job to do to call out that bad behavior, to embrace the behavior of difference. Hockey players just get their individuality completely quashed, and the media have a big part in that. So fans need to embrace difference. They need to rally against, the good old hockey man. And we need to say that that's a thing of the past and that we just don't accept it anymore.
Yeah. The sad part is there's still a large segment of fans who do accept it.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's unfortunate. I mean, if you're a listener who's like, nah, man, you're blowing this out of proportion, I disagree. I strongly disagree. A Darryl Sutter approach needs to change. Mark Crawford. I'll use Mark Crawford as an example.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mark has had issues, some of which have come out publicly as to the treatment of players. And Mark publicly recognized, this is the way I learned how to coach. This is what I did. I wasn't the only one. I did it. I've learned it's wrong. I need to improve. I need to figure this out. Now, I'm not giving him a pass, but at one point has Darryl Sutter ever gone and done that and actually demonstrated it? Like, as of this weekend, sure hasn't.
No. I mean, just think of that lawsuit in the CHL where like abuse of young players by their peers was at best ignored, probably encouraged by the coaches, and everyone was shocked by that. But it's the same, nowhere near the same extent in the NHL, but it's the same hockey culture. And
I genuinely wonder. Well, we might say that doesn't exist in the NHL. I genuinely wonder if it doesn't.
Oh, I'm sure there are instances.
Hasn't.
Yeah, I'm sure there are instances for sure. And what we'll go on to talk about later is another indication of just the problem with hockey culture. And yeah, well, I'll just introduce that topic, and that's the whole idea of game management and officiating.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to spin this a little off the rails. Game management is not exclusive to NHL officiating. Game management, I think, exists across officiating in sport. Growing up, when I was officiating soccer, I was officiating softball. First and foremost, I would make mistakes. And one of the things that I would do in building a rapport with teams is I might say, yeah, I didn't see that one. I missed it. It might have happened. In fact, the circumstances present itself as you're describing it to me. I kind of believe you did, but I didn't see it. I missed it. So I'm promising not to go and miss it again. But why would I have this conversation and I have that candid conversation in places? Because I'm, again, establishing rapport, and it's something that I've built over time. I didn't go fess up and do that. Now, when I was officiating softball, that strike zone that might be used might be slightly more flexible. The next time I have that thought, was that in the zone? I'm probably going to lean to, yeah, it probably is, because I missed one earlier that might, I'm kind of thinking of it like I'm managing the game, but I'm consistent in how it's approached. I'm managing that way. I don't let calls go. I'm just probably seeing things through a different lens. Now, you look at what Tim Peel did. Tim publicly stated on a hot mic that he was looking to call a penalty. That level of game management is problematic. If you're looking to go and either make up for a mistake or looking for a call, that speaks to a much larger issue. And unfortunately for Tim, he is the scapegoat the NHL has used to try to suggest it's a localized problem. It's not. Game management has always been a thing in the NHL to that level.
The fact that they've managed to spin it, that people are calling it the Tim Peel situation or anything like that, just shows that how they're trying to set it as this one-off thing. It's clearly not. I mean, his co-official agreed with him on the call, but it happens all the time. The fact that they're trying to spin it as one bad apple, like, the bunch has already been spoiled. There is a deeper issue.
Yeah. Well, and making this matter a whole lot worse is the guy who's essentially making the decision, or at the highest level involved in making the decision, is someone who is in the court record already been shown to be looking to influence officials and manage the game better. Like, this is so surreal that the NHL doesn't see this as a problem. And unfortunately, it might not be because of, again, how people approach. Like the conversation now has, to your point, been the Tim Peel situation, or, man, referees just need to call the rule book. It's never going to be just call the rule book. It never will be. There's a variety of reasons. One, referees are going to miss things. They're not going to see things happen. Or what they see will be interpreted differently because in real time, it just looks a little bit different. And that will always occur. I agree that from a consistency perspective, games need to be consistently approached. So what you call in the first period, you'd call in, overtime, and equally in overtime in the first period. I also feel that what you call in the first game of the season should be the same thing you make call on in the Stanley Cup final game 7. But that's not a Tim Peel situation. This is just, unfortunately, the way the league has allowed this to occur. And probably the reason why they went and, took the hammer to Tim Peel as hardly as they did, or as heavily as they did, has everything to do with the fact that sports betting is a thing. It will become a bigger thing in the NHL. And this type of stuff, man, once there's big money involved, the NHL will have huge problems. Like, I actually wonder if sports betting is what's actually going to bring the NHL to the modern age of transparency.
I mean, it's sad, but probably true. But then the betting very rarely completely comes to improve a sport. It also brings that added problem of money. And if they're not calling it cleanly now, will they call it cleanly when there's a whole bunch of money involved? Not necessarily. I mean, the problem is there isn't just the isolated incident of some team got a penalty that they should not have done. Maybe the other team scored on the power play. But just the spin-off that causes is, you've got, it just transfers the game. Instead of managing the game, it transfers the game out of the officials' power because you've got a bunch of players who are annoyed at how the game's being called, and they take matters into their own hands. And we know just how dangerous, vigilante NHL players can be.
Yeah. But that, again, as you'd sort of talked to earlier, that's built around the code. It's like Pirates of the Caribbean code level is how surreal the NHL is.
I think that's the second time we brought that up on the podcast because I asked what parlay meant. Yeah. Anyway, that film has too much airtime on our podcast already. It's not that good a movie.
Speaking of movies, films, and airtime, we're going to be talking about that a little bit later in the show. But ultimately, I'm curious what our listeners' thoughts are on sort of the Tim Peel situation. Obviously, I'm interested in your thoughts on everything that we talk about, but specifically with officiating NHL. I'm not asking for people to tell me how the NHL has a thing, or at least NHL officials have a thing against the Vancouver Canucks. I don't subscribe to that theory whatsoever. I'm not. You can tell me all the proof that you have, and frankly, all you're doing is looking at everything in a circumstantial lens. But the point being is that NHL officials, such as someone like Tim Peel, who was set to retire at the end of the season and has ultimately been shamed because of a problem the NHL has always had, and unfortunately, for one reason or another, not chosen to deal with. It has this truly changed, or is this just sweep it under the carpet and hope no one notices it when the next story hits the news cycle?
It's like giving Tom Wilson a suspension after you spend years encouraging him to play that way, because by not giving him suspensions, by replaying his big dangerous hits on highlight shows, and by every way the sport is constructed, and then you just slap a suspension on him. Like, we didn't do that. Like, we didn't want you to do that. We didn't want you to play that way. Anyway.
Yeah. That's a story for a whole different podcast. Looking to sort of wrap things up on a much more positive note, the Isabel Cup has been awarded. Now, first and foremost, they had obviously an interesting season for themselves. They had a bubble experience that ultimately got put on hold because of pandemic. Fortunately, they found a mechanism to then restart and continue play. But Anna, I know you were a big fan of, was it the Connecticut Whale, was it?
Yes, I am currently wearing my Connecticut Whale hoodie.
Which I was the Minnesota Whitecaps fan only because of the Whitecaps correlation.
Vancouver Whitecaps, yeah. Yeah, to me it was blue, green, whale, sea creature. It sort of seemed to make sense.
Totally makes sense.
Since there was no connection to any of the geographical areas, obviously it was not going to support Boston. Like, doesn't matter what scenario. But well done.
Who won the Isabel Cup?
Yeah, the Boston Pride.
Unfortunately.
But I will say that, sorry.
I was going to say, the games that I did see, entertaining and interesting. Though I will concede, I got excited by the Zamboni cam that they had during the intermission, because I'm like, all they need to do is play the music from like the, I think it was ice hockey on the NES when the Zambonis sort of went across and they had like a musical interlude, because it's like the nostalgia part. I'm not taking away from the game. I'd much rather watch the hockey because it was good hockey, but
it was great hockey. There was some really stunning performances, especially in net, and I love goalies, so I will say that Amanda Lavelle of the Minnesota Whitecaps was an outstanding goalie, and same with the Boston Pride goalie, whose name I forget. Maybe I'm trying to forget it. But yeah, there's some really stunning performances. The Leafs needs to be going from strength to strength. Had the support of the NHL big time, especially this time round. Seemed to be kind of radio silence the first time the Isabel Cup playoffs kind of came round. But this weekend you had NHL players saying whose team they were supporting and really promoting it. But yeah, in general, they seem to have done a really good job. They don't take themselves too seriously, which the NHL could learn from social media perspective and stuff like that. But yeah, so I mean, they were on Sportsnet and NBC, I believe NBC. So hopefully, as we switch over to the new TV deal in the States, that continues to get some support, because yeah, it was really great to see. And not to mention that these players are, having full-time jobs.
And to use, like I was going to say a Canadian example, it's almost akin to CFL players. Like many Canadian Football League players have day jobs, not as many now because of how the league is structured, but they're, top tier pinnacle players who, for a variety of reasons, have to have a day job to continue to make things work. The NWHL players, these are some top tier pinnacle of their game players who simply out of necessity still need to have a day job.
Yeah, I remember when I first moved here, and I still don't know a lot about CFL, but when the player of the season, don't know what that award's called, the media had to wait when it was announced to interview him for his break at work.
That would make sense. So the CFL actually has sort of two Player of the Year awards,
right?
Because there's one that's top Canadian, because the MVP isn't always necessarily a Canadian player,
right?
So they sort of recognize top Canadian and then the top player of the league. It's not as frequent. Well, maybe now because of the pandemic, but there for a period of time, many of these players, if they had another job, it was supplemental income, not the I need to pay my bills income.
Right.
I was going to say, as we sort of look to wrap up the show, I had earlier talked about how we were going to sort of refer to films and movies. And that is the topic of a voicemail we received on the C4 text line, which, hey, if you haven't done so already, you can drop your very own voicemail by calling 604-200-6201, 604-200-6201. You can also send a text message. But let's throw it to Ian in Saskatoon.
Greetings to the longest-running Canucks podcast that I listen to. This is Ian from Saskatoon here, and as I record this message, the Canucks are currently down 3-0, and there's about 5 minutes left in the third period on Monday night. I do hope, though, that this latest setback will convince day-to-day Benning that it's time to try and make trades and clear space for the re-signing of Pettersson, Hughes, and Demko. Unfortunately, I'm worried that they've done it well enough over the past couple of weeks that he'll keep thinking he can wait another day until he runs out of time. In other positive news, though, we might have more fodder for C4 at the movies, as the Disney Plus Mighty Ducks series starts airing later this week. I remember how much Anna enjoyed watching those movies. Anyhow, thanks for the great podcast. Bye.
So Ian is referring to a series that has actually been out now for a weekend, and the conversation that he had with you on Twitter sort of ties in to obviously the content of the voicemail. He left the voicemail while we were recording last week, which is why you're only now hearing it in this week's show. So for those who are sending messages, if we don't have it sort of by like Monday morning, might take a week or so to get included. But Anna, big fan of the Mighty Ducks, as we all know you are. What did you think of Game Changers?
So I haven't watched it. Don't think I will. Because life's too short.
Well, you're missing out. I say that after one episode, maybe somewhat facetiously, because it is just one episode. I feel, though, they are setting the show up to take a different spin on sort of the Mighty Ducks lore. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler, because if you saw a trailer, Emilio Estevez, I think, is sort of filling the character of Hans that we would have known.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems to be the case. The Mighty Ducks have sort of evolved as a team. So think of them as more of the Hawks from the first movie, and the new sort of upstart team is what we would have known as the Ducks. Obviously, we don't know much more than what was shown in the first episode. And if I have one complaint, it's not that Disney Plus has chosen to release their episodes in an episodic format as opposed to the share everything on one day and we binge it. I can accept that. It's just that they're setting the series up over a couple of episodes. And that first episode was like almost like part one of part 2 or 3, you know? So I kind of wish there were 2 episodes.
It has you intrigued.
It has me intrigued. That's true. It's just like, I kind of wanted a little bit more. You didn't give me enough. I like to be left wanting more, but when I don't like is I'm still hungry to the point where I'm starving and didn't satiate the appetite well enough.
I'm not a binging person, so I kind of love waiting a week and cliffhangers. And I'm not saying I'm never going to watch it, especially as it's all different characters. It might appeal to me a bit more. And especially if Gordon Bombay is less in it, that wouldn't be too bad a thing.
Yeah, so, I mean, I can't say for certainty that there's less Gordon, but in the first episode, there was less Gordon. Are we going to see different characters? We are, though, based on the fact that Cliff Ronning is a stunt double leads me to believe we're getting Averman back, at least for an episode or 2. Like, I think we'll see
Right.
I'll use Cobra Kai as an example. We've talked about Cobra Kai and how it sort of really does justice to the Karate Kid sort of lore and connection to the movies. I feel it serves nostalgia the right way, and it's carried over themes. I kind of feel that they're going to do something similar here with Game Changers. Is they're adding a flexibility of a new story with new characters, but I feel they're going to go and tap into the nostalgia the right way, not make it about nostalgia.
Yeah, because
the new experience.
That's the danger, right? And it does seem to be the trap that a lot of remakes or reimaginings fall into. So we'll see how it goes.
Cool. But thanks for the voicemail, Ian. As I mentioned to everyone else, feel free to drop your own voicemail, leave us comments about the show, comments about anything. There's a good chance that you're going to hear it to show up on an episode, at least upcoming. So yeah, here we are. As I said, end of the show. C4 text line 604-200-6201. Or if you need the computer, you can use speakpipe.com/C4 podcast. That's purely online. And then the weekly newsletter is still a thing. It will be a thing for many more weeks, hopefully. To join, it's bit.ly/the C4 newsletter. It's where you get exclusive insight into what's going on with the podcast. This past week's episode, a little light, but honestly, not for a lack of trying. It's just a few things that we had in the oven didn't quite pan out as we had planned. And I didn't want to go and sort of say, hey guys, we got this person lined up and they're going to join us. Oh my God, they're awesome. When we haven't actually heard the person commit to actually joining us. So
yeah, we don't want to disappoint you. So
yeah,
that's just the way it shook out. There'll be different lengths, different weeks. So.
Yeah, but there are some, as I said, I keep saying exciting things happening with the podcast. There was a question out of the patron chat as to whether or not we have a merch store. We do. If you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll know that there is one. I'm going to actually suggest that if you're wanting C4 merch, maybe hold off on buying the stuff that currently exists for reasons. Wyatt happens to buy something because he apparently is buying Canucks podcast merch. Good on Wyatt, but
I would say though,
C4 merch.
If you want to be a completist, like go ahead and buy C4 merch.
Yeah, I won't say no. It's just that I don't want you to like. We're refreshing things.
Yeah.
Is that a good way to put things? We're
but you know
things.
what? Like vintage works too, and the green T-shirts look sick.
It does.
And I don't have a green T-shirt, and I wish that I had chosen green. But my Billy one looks great. But having seen the green shirt on Matt and friend of the show Annalise, I'm like, oh, that looks really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyways.
But yeah. So, what final words of wisdom do you have for all the listeners there, Anna?
I know we've probably skewed a bit negative again this week, but it's my. I did try and be positive, and I feel like Chris dragged me towards negativity, as he always does. But you know what? I'm gonna try and be positive, and I do think Jim Benning, out of pure desperation, might play this deadline a bit smarter than previously.
I don't know if I can get to that place. I mean, hey, Jim, surprise me, shock me, do the crazy, make good moves, make me eat crow. As I've constantly said, I would be more than ecstatic if the Vancouver Canucks go out and prove me wrong. I know they listen to the show, so if they go out, they make the plus, they win the Stanley Cup. Jim Benning is given GM of the year. Do all that, embarrass me. I'm okay with that. I have no problem saying I was wrong. But unfortunately, I'm a long-suffering, jaded Canucks fan, and I just don't feel that's going to be the case. Final words of wisdom from me. Get yourself an Oculus Quest if you haven't done so already. I have one. So does a friend of the show, Jay, now. We're going to be playing like Beat Saber. Anna, you need to experience Beat Saber. It's wonderful.
That sounds wrong, but I won't make any.
Okay, comment. Well, I didn't need to take it there, but you did. I can't believe it. You did.
My mind's in the gutter.
Yeah. And your mom listens to this podcast too, so.
Sorry, Mom.
Anywho, as you already know, you can follow us online at c4podcast.com or on Twitter at the C4 Podcast, facebook.com/C4Podcast. And as I've mentioned multiple times, but one more time just for glory, C4 text line 604-200-6201, 604-200-6201. So on behalf of Anna at 84603, myself, Chris at Lightforce, we're going to sign off with those words. We out.